All right, hello everyone. Hey, this is Kylan Hunt, Vice President of Business Development at Grow Guru, and I have a very exciting topic for you guys today. Here a while back, I was chatting with Dr. David Sloan, and we were talking about how water moves through soil. And what he did is he put together a video that showed us exactly how water moves through the soil. And today he's going to show up here live. He's going to talk through this process with us and talk a little bit about the value of this. So, David, welcome to this video. Welcome to this interview, if you will. And I'm excited, man. I'm excited to talk about this topic of water moving through the soil, how the soil wets up. Can you, before we dive into this, David, can you share with us a little bit of how you learned this and maybe some of your first experiences in seeing and experiencing what you're about to show us?
Yeah, it's something that I guess I can't say I came up with on my own. It's something I was taught when I was just coming out of college, early days of my irrigation scheduling, irrigation management career, and it took me a little while to really understand it. But it's really powerful, and as we all know, fertilizer is so expensive, and if you don't know how the soil wets up, you could be losing that fertilizer straight out the bottom. And so it's really, really important to know. It's also important for the environment. We don't want to wash nitrates through into the groundwater. So, um, yes, it's something that I've known for a while. I've been trying to explain it to people, but hey, in the end, I thought, let's just make a video. Let's show people because it's a
Yeah.
hard concept to really grasp.
Well, when you first mentioned it to me, it was hard for me to get my head wrapped around because one of the things that I've heard you say and we discussed it because I just questioned you about it is the last water on is the first water through and it's the first water out. And that was really a hard concept for me. And I think what we ought to do is just show the audience here what you mean by that. And you can just give us an example. You ready to dive into it?
Yeah, let's go to the whiteboard here because I can show you. Um, I can. It's an easier concept to draw it. And so if we start out with a soil particle, right, just one single soil particle, what happens when that gets wet is that water sticks to the outside of that particle, and so it coats that dry particle and then it coats all the particles around it. But then water sticks to, if I just sort of draw some little water molecules, water then sticks to water. But the bond with the water sticking to the soil is much, much stronger than the bond of water sticking to itself. And eventually what happens is that you get so far away from the soil particle that that water just drains through. And so gravity takes over. So the further away from the particles you get, uh, gravity will take over. So as I'm wetting up the soil, the the first or the most tightly held water is what's right against the soil. And so when the soil's dry, that first water on is basically the last water to be used. So if you think about, let me just clear this out and say, okay, what did I do to prove this? Well, we took a pot and I took water with dye in it. And so we started out with some red dye. So we applied the water with dye, and you can see it wets up, and then it wets again, and so it's actually wetting the soil, and you can see it soaking through. But what's actually happening is that the water is running through the wet soil to get to the layer beneath. So now, if for example I took a different color, I can then see that wet up below. And what I didn't have blue, I didn't want to actually saturate all the colors. So what I did is I took red and then I took yellow. And so the yellow actually moves all the way through and it wets the bottom of the pot. Very hard to see the color in the soil, but what you can see when it comes out the bottom is the water is yellow. Really hard concept to grasp that, man, you'd think that the last water on sits at the top, but it doesn't. It actually goes through the wet soil because that first water on is coating the particles. they're all coated. So then it goes to the next layer and coats those particles. And then the next water on goes through the wet soil and goes to the next layer and coats those particles until everything is wet. So now that water is just flowing straight through. So if, for example, you had a potted plant and you wet the soil in that pot all the way through till it was coming out the bottom, and then you left it and you came back 6 or 12 or 24 hours later and poured more water on, that's just going to go straight through and out the bottom. And so we need to create some dry soil for that water to stick to. So probably a good time to let's have a look at the video.
Yeah, so here's the video, David. We'll go ahead and play this. It's only a couple of minutes long. We sped it up. Maybe you can share with us kind of what you did here again.
Yeah, so I took some garden soil. It was bagged garden soil from the hardware store, and I sieved it to basically knock a lot of the clods and things out. And then we started to it's dry, and added red dye to the top, and then I left it for about an hour just to let it sit. And I came back with some yellow dye, so it's water with yellow dye, and started pouring that onto the pot. The whole thing, for the water to reach from the top to the bottom, took about an hour and 20 minutes. So it took a while. You can see we're ponding that water with the yellow dye on the top. And now it's starting to soak through. And so I just spun the pot a couple of times so you can see that it's not running down the side. It's nice and evenly wetting up, so it's soaking through. And that water is running through the wet soil until it gets to the bottom. And as you can see, there's still yellow water with yellow dye sitting on the top, but once it starts to come out the bottom, it's actually yellow, and it's hard to grasp. But all of that red dye, the water with the red dye, is so we can see there's yellow coming out the bottom, and all that
Yeah.
red is stuck up in the soil.
Yeah.
And as this continues to flow, there wasn't a single bit of red in it; it was all yellow.
Wow. And you know it was kind of cool watching that soak through. It kind of gives you an idea of what it's like for a soil profile to wet up. And as we're watching this, David, and I'm thinking about this, nutrient management, again, that timing of irrigation is so critical because if we want to place water where we most need it, we have to understand these soil water dynamics, don't we? I mean, how this is actually moving.
Absolutely. So, if, for example, the soil was already wet, and then I come in and try and fertilize or fertigate, that's just going to run straight through, and I'm not going to catch that.
Mm.
And so, it'll be deep down in the soil.
Mm.
But conversely, if I'm trying to wet up the subsoil, I actually need the soil above it to be wet so that it can run through. So, if I'm trying to bank deep soil moisture, sometimes the best time to irrigate might be after a rainfall or something like that, because I can't get the water through dry soil. I have to wet the top up before I can get it to run through to the layers beneath. And so that's really important too in terms of setting yourself up for the next season.
Well, David, I got to tell you honestly, this was eye opening for me to be able to see it, and it's one of those things that we've learned. We talk about it, we train on it, but to see it really gives us a totally different perspective, and it gives us a totally different hope, if you will, on getting our irrigation right. And I
Mhm.
think this is what it really showed me. And you know, I want to do some more video on this, David, and do some more training along these lines. What do you think are a couple of topics that we should prepare for in our next couple of videos?
Well, I actually took that same pot when it was wet, and then I put clear water on the top. And so this was 24 hours later. The soil was by definition at field capacity. And that was an interesting thing in and of itself because I got an entirely different uh, response. What I
Really?
found,
Okay.
yeah,
So when the soil was fully saturated, your response was different. Full capacity, your response was different.
yeah. So what happened was that the clear water just pushed the yellow water down through the pot, and it was hydraulic flow. And so it's because all of the pore spaces were taken up, because all the soil was already coated. It's just like squeezing toothpaste out of a tube. So that was the last water on stayed higher. But of course, all of it's going to drain because none of it can really be held back against gravity.
So what you're really saying is the secret to a lot of this is airspace, and having an understanding how much airspace you have is going to determine how you're moving water through the soil.
Yeah, it's the starting moisture content really dictates how water behaves when it wets into the
Wow.
soil, and so
Wow.
it's
Well, I think we need to end this video. This was really amazing in and of itself, David. And let's dive into that other video. Let's take a look at that, and then our audience can take a look at both of them and kind of get the feel for that. Does that sound good to you?
yeah, cool.
Are awesome. Well, you guys saw it here. You saw how water really starts to move through the soil. We did it with two different colors, so we can understand that soil, that soil getting a hold of that soil, or that water getting a hold of that soil particle. That was a great example that David gave there. Water's got to have something to hang on to. So water's got to have something to hang on to, and when it's already hanging on to soil, as we saw with the red water, it's already tied up in that soil. It's not going to go anywhere. So the yellow water went through it. Totally amazing. Totally opens up my eyes about how we can manage water long term, especially in our deep soils. But as David shared here at the end, he's got something different to show us in the next video, because when you're fully wet all the way through and that airspace has been removed, get a totally different response. So these are what we want to identify when we're using soil sensors. These are things that we identify when we're scheduling irrigation and even managing rain events. If we know how wet that soil is, we're going to understand how rain goes through the profile. So I'm anxious to get into this next video that David's going to share with us. We'll see you over there in just a few minutes.